let's go ahead and get into our opening passage for this morning as we are going to take a look at Isaiah chapter 9, first couple of verses where we read, if you would, "Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." Light and darkness have been used as metaphors to contrast good and evil almost from the beginning of time. We say that someone sees the light when they come to understand something, and that they are in the dark when they don't understand. And I'm sure most of you have used that terminology quite often. I know I have. You know, they're just in the dark about everything, or they just need to see the light. And so that contrast is something that has been around virtually from the beginning of time. And in that opening passage, there are 4 statements about light and darkness that we read. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. And then if we're going to find later on in John, I forget, didn't put that passage in there. I should have. It comes a little bit later. But from John, the first chapter, we'll find in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And today I want us to explore what God is telling us in these passages, which are connected. But to begin with, I want to ask a question that is key to understanding these passages. What is darkness? Have you ever thought about that? What is darkness? Well, first of all, it's not something that you can turn on and off. You can't walk into a room and turn on darkness. So just as cold is the absence of heat, if you would, darkness is the absence of light. It's the result of everything being turned off, not turning something on. You turn something on, the darkness goes away. But darkness is the result of everything being turned off. It is the absence of light. Because as we observe around us on a daily basis, light drives out the darkness. I mean, we go through night, and what happens as the sun comes up? The darkness goes away. And so what we see is that where there is no light, there is darkness. Have you ever been to some place like Mammoth Cave or Carlsbad Caverns where you can take the tour down into the cave? Ever been into something like that? I don't know if they still do this or they did that when you were in there. Excuse me. I remember I went to Mammoth Cave, and you get down into one of the deepest regions of the cave, and the guy reaches over and flips a switch. Absolute, total darkness. You could put your hand on your nose and you can't see it. That's the kind of darkness we're talking about spiritually. That where there is no light, there is darkness. And so it is that Isaiah writes in the first part of Isaiah chapter 2, if you would, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. So like I said, continue with that idea. Have you ever found yourself trying to walk through a dark house at night? You know, perhaps the power went off in the middle of the night and you didn't know it, and for some reason you wake up and realize you need to find a flashlight or candles. You know, and what do? Well, you're kind of stumbling around trying to find your way because there's just not any light, trying to find whatever it is you're looking for. And maybe along the line you stub your toes on a couple of things. And you begin to realize that's what toes are for. Finding furniture in the dark. You know, you're trying to feel your way around, and suddenly, oh yeah, that's the dining room table. Or you trip over something that wasn't supposed to be there. And the entire time, you know you need to find some source of light so that you can see where you're going. Otherwise, you're going to be pretty bruised and battered up. Everything in what would be considered a very familiar environment, your house, has suddenly become an invisible obstacle course. I mean, you turn the lights on, you know where everything is at. And in your mind, even though it's dark, you know, well, the dining room table is here, and sofa's here, and this is there, and that's there. But when the lights are off and you're trying to navigate through it, it's a whole different story. You know where it is, but for some reason you keep bumping into it. You keep stumbling over it. And so you begin to wonder, did I really know where it was in the first place? See, but now that it's dark and you can't see anything, you're not sure where anything is. All you know is you keep running into everything and stumbling over everything that you thought you knew where it was. And you realize that you only knew where everything was when you could see it. But as soon as you found yourself in the dark, you were all of a sudden in a foreign environment. And everything is not as it seemed in the light. And so everything is still in its place. But everything has changed at the same time now that it's dark and you can't see anything. And that is life for the vast majority of the world. You see, for many people in this world, if you would, it is a life filled with spiritual darkness. They're stumbling around, trying to figure things out, trying to find purpose. And they're constantly stumbling over things. For them, living life has been completely by trial and error. I mean, several weeks ago, we mentioned the fact that, people say, well, life doesn't come with an instruction book. Oh, yes, it does. Like we said, we've got the instruction book if we'll follow it. But so many people are going through life not consulting the instruction book, and it is a life of trial and error. There's no sense of direction. There's no sense of purpose. It's just like being in your house, stumbling around in the darkness. Everything's where it's supposed to be, but it's an obstacle course instead of a benefit. And for them, everything that they need, it's there. But they can't see it for the spiritual darkness. And so as a result, they stumble over it. It's kind of that idea of what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that the cross for the Jews is a stumbling block. It's what they need. It's right there, but because of the darkness in their lives, they stumble over it. For the Greeks, it's foolishness. And so for so many people, life is filled with spiritual darkness, and they spend all of their time stumbling around, trying to find direction, trying to figure out what's up, what's down, trying to find a purpose for living. But then Isaiah also writes in that second verse, if you would, on those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. For many, an even deeper darkness has overtaken the lives of them. It's a darkness that is so deep and so intense that it's become a prison. They are trapped in the underbelly of society. They are prisoners in a world of guilt, hopelessness, sex, drugs, violence, poverty, human trafficking, mental and emotional abuse, the occult, and so much more. They're imprisoned in a world of total depravity. And there doesn't seem to be a way out. And this prison holds young and old alike, male and female. It doesn't care. Some wandered in by choice, looking to find a way out of the darkness they were already in, only to find themselves imprisoned in an even deeper darkness that refuses to let go. A darkness that becomes addictive, while others were taken unwillingly as captives. But whether they entered by choice or were taken captive, if you would, all have found themselves in a prison of intense darkness that can be felt. And I don't mean just a physical feeling. It's a darkness that invades the very soul of humanity. It's not only a world where there is an absence of spiritual light. It's a world where the spiritual light is being just sucked out of them. It's a spiritual darkness so intense that they can feel it. In Exodus we read, if you would, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Stretch out your hand toward the sky so that darkness spreads over Egypt, darkness that can be felt.' So Moses stretched out his hand toward the sky, and total darkness covered all Egypt for 3 days. No one could see anyone else or move about for 3 days." See, when God sent that plague of darkness upon Egypt, He sent a force that absorbed the light. If you read the context of the passage, what you begin to understand is that even though they had candles and lamps burning, you couldn't see the light. The light was being drawn into this energy, this force. And it's the same way for so many people in this world today spiritually, that any source of light around them spiritually seems to be just drawn away. The light is absorbed, just like the torches and candles and other light sources in Egypt that couldn't be seen even though they were lit. That is what so many are facing in life today. Especially as you look around and you begin to see the rise of the occult, the Satan worshipers, and the things going on. There's things going on out there that we are so unaware of, and there's so much of it is right on our own doorstep. And I think one of the reasons we have a tendency to not be aware of it is we've gotten in a habit of turning a blind eye so that we don't recognize what's really going on around us. I mean, how many times have you found yourself in a situation, you're more than likely in a store somewhere or a restaurant, and someone walks in, they got a T-shirt on, and right there is a pentagram. And what is our reaction? We don't think twice about it. Well, that's just society today. That's just a shirt. No. That is a symbol of the darkness that is starting to permeate this world. That darkness that for so many has become a prison that can be felt, that just will not let go. And the darkness they are in that is holding them prisoner is so intense, they can feel it. And the spiritual light from every source that around them is being absorbed and not seen. It's no wonder so many caught in this deep darkness commit suicide. Because they can't fathom any way out of it. The desperation and the despair are so intense that hopelessness becomes more than they can endure. You know, we may have a hard time fathoming a deep darkness that can be felt. Or maybe you have felt it without realizing it. Have you ever walked into a place where something just horrific has happened? And when you walk in, you can't explain it, but the hair on the back of your neck begins to stand up. There is a darkness that can be felt in that room or in that building or in that location. A deep evil that for so many people is a prison they cannot get out of. It has become a normal part of their life. It's a darkness that few of us can even begin to imagine. I mean, while we were wandering around, stubbing our toes in the darkness, so to speak, they are being crushed. These people are being crushed by overwhelming weight of the darkness they live in. Because if you would, they are living in that valley of deep darkness. And only a supernatural force can break their chains and release them from that deep, dark prison. Part of a psalm that was written to celebrate the return of the Jews from exile almost seems to reflect the spiritual condition that Isaiah is describing in his prophecy concerning the birth of Jesus. In Psalm 107, if you would, some sat in darkness, in utter darkness, prisoners suffering in iron chains because they rebelled against God's commands and despised the plans of the Most High. So he subjected them to bitter labor. They stumbled, and there was no one to help. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and He saved them from their distress. He brought them out of darkness, the utter darkness, and broke away their chains. They couldn't free themselves. They were brought out through the supernatural power of God. I don't know if you realize that, but at one time each of us who are in Christ Jesus lived in darkness. And we could not get ourselves out of that darkness. Christ had to do it for us. It was by His power, not ours, that we were brought out of that darkness. And there are millions today living in that darkness. Many of them in that deep darkness that can be felt. It is a darkness that is so overwhelmed with evil that we cannot imagine it. But Isaiah also gives hope. For he writes, if you would, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Those living in the land of deep darkness, on them a light has shined, has dawned. See, he prophesied a light to break through the darkness, even the deep darkness that can be felt. A power that is capable of breaking the shackles and opening the doors of that prison. Those living in spiritual darkness do not have to remain there. We were once in spiritual darkness. And He broke our chains, opened the doors, and took us out of that prison. John writes, if you would, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The promise of Isaiah. John tells us that Jesus is that light, that hope sent into the world to drive out the darkness, and that the light of Christ cannot be overcome. It is a supernatural light. It is a power beyond our imagination. The light that can drive out the deepest, most intense darkness there is. For if you would, in Jesus there is life, and that life brings light to our darkness. He is the hope that those who are in spiritual darkness are longing for. He was the hope that we were longing for when we were in spiritual darkness. And so many have found themselves at the bottom of that deep, dark pit, sinking in the mire and sinking in the evil. And life seems hopeless to them. They seem bound. There doesn't seem to be any way out. Many are longing for help, longing for that light to come into their lives and break them free from the chains of sin and darkness. Sadly, there are many who've given up. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees once brought a woman caught in adultery to Jesus in an attempt to trap Him in His words. And after dealing with the situation and showing the woman mercy and telling her to go and leave her life of sin, He spoke to the crowd gathered there in response to what they had just witnessed. In John 8 we read, if you would, when Jesus spoke again to the people, He said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. She had been one of those living in darkness, but the light of Jesus set her free. And Jesus tells the crowd that they too can be set free from the darkness of sin that has them bound by following His light. All too often, we view Jesus, the babe in the manger is part of the Christmas story. You know, He's just one of the elements. I mean, we look at it and we think about the nativity. You know, we got Jesus in the manger, and we got Mary and Joseph, and we got the shepherds and the angels, and then later on the Magi come, and everything's just different parts of the Christmas story. But the reality is, if you would, the Christmas story is a part of Jesus and His bringing that light into the world. He's more than the babe in the manger. The light that He brought into the world cannot be overcome. Nothing is going to be able to ever put out the light that He brought. That light has been setting people free from the bonds of sin and darkness for 2,000 years. And His light will continue to set people free until the day He returns. Nothing will ever overcome that light. And the light of Christ is a transforming light. Those who embrace it are changed. There is no darkness that His light cannot drive out. For the alcoholic and drug addict, there is hope in His light. For the family that's falling apart, there's hope in His light. For the child enduring daily physical, sexual, mental, and emotional abuse, there is hope in His light. For the spouse constantly enduring the physical, sexual, mental, and emotional abuse, there is hope in His light. For those trapped in the horrific world of human trafficking, there is hope in His light. For those struggling with life-shattering changes, there's hope in His light. For the homeless, there's hope in His light. For the young mother who has lost her husband and is left with young children to raise by herself, there's hope in His light. For the one who has lost their dearest love and said goodbye, there's hope in His light. For the one who is bound in the world of the occult, there is hope in His light. For the one who has just been diagnosed with a terminal illness, there's hope in His light. For the one who is in deep despair and depression, for the one who feels like no one cares and they are alone in this world, there is hope in His light. For the one who feels like life isn't worth living, there is hope in His light. For there is no darkness that His light cannot drive out. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind, if you would. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it, and it never will. We read the Luke account of the birth of Christ and the angels, and sometime later, as we read in the book of Matthew, the Magi followed the star to find the true light that had come into the world. You see, the Christmas story is the story of the light coming into the darkness of our lives and driving it away. And it's just the beginning of the story. His light shines even in the deepest darkness. And it shines and shines, driving away that darkness and the shadows even today. On down in Isaiah, we read the promise, if you would. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on His shoulders, and He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. The Christmas story recounts the beginning of light driving out darkness. The light of Christ coming into the world. For all who would embrace that light to be brought out of whatever darkness they are in to eternal life. to bring peace in our lives. Well, Jesus made it plain in his ministry. He didn't come to bring peace in the world, but rather to bring peace within us between God and man. As that light drives away the darkness of sin and sets us free. Think for a moment of the many things that the light of Christ has set you free from. Things that you may have been struggling with. That with the help of God, you've overcome it. You've come through it. You've endured. You know, we celebrate the birth of Christ. We celebrate the light coming into the world. I want to encourage you this Christmas season. Don't just celebrate the light coming into the world, but celebrate the darkness that's been driven out of your life by that light. Lift up to Him gratitude and praise for the things that He's brought you through, for the things that He has helped you to overcome, for the darkness He has driven out of your life, and the light that He has given to you. And with whatever darkness is still there that you're struggling with, bring it to Him. Let His light drive it away. Because darkness cannot overcome light. And the light of Christ will always prevail. Regardless of what darkness there is in your life, He will shine light and drive it out. What do you need to bring to Him today? What have you brought to Him that He has already driven out? Would you recount those things in gratitude and lift up the things that you still need Him to drive out?